We're talking today with Mr. Donald Gary of Granville, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of Grand Valley State University. Now, Mr. Gary, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself? For instance, where and when were you born?
Sure, I was born in Rochester, New York, as Donald Gary, and mother's name was Muriel, father's name was Daniel. I had 4 brothers and 1 sister.
Now, what year were you born in?
And that was in 1930.
Okay. Now, what did your family do? What did your father do for a living?
My father basically liked to work with the ground. Mm-hmm. He did landscaping, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, when the Depression came along, nobody had any work for him.
Right.
So finally, he got together with a political boss, you might say, of the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And if he promised to vote the right way, he'd get him a job in a foundry. So he worked in a foundry. And he worked there until he was rolling train wheels from a rail car onto a platform across a 2x10. And the 2x10 tipped. Mm-hmm. He went down and the car wheel, 750 pounds, landed on his leg and shattered it. Mm-hmm. So that kind of put it into his working.
Now, when did that happen?
That was probably about I was in the service at the time, so it had to be someplace between 1950 and 54.
Okay, but basically this is a job that he had while you were growing up then?
Yeah.
Okay, now did you finish high school?
I finished high school and I came here and went to Davenport College.
How did you wind up coming out here to go to college if you're growing up out in Rochester?
Well, that's kind of interesting. I live in New York. My wife lives in Kansas. Mm-hmm. So we looked at the map and we saw that we had lots of lakes and everything in the Michigan area, and there was lots of furniture work, which I like to do is furniture work. And we moved here because it was just 1,000 or 700 miles mm-hmm. back to New York.
Right.
But it was 1,000 miles to
out to Kansas.
Right. So we could make one way one day. The other way we had to do it too.
Now, and then when did you get married?
Married in 1953. That was on June 8th. And that was a nice day to get married out in Kansas, because June 8th, 1953, it happened to be 108 degrees in the shade.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, but that's sort of getting us farther down the line. Let's sort of back up here. Now, you finished high school in Rochester then?
Yes.
Okay. And now, while you were growing up, I mean, there's the Depression stuff going on. You also had World War II going on. How much attention did you pay to that at the time?
Quite a bit, because I had one brother that was in the National Guard mm-hmm. when the war started.
Okay.
And he automatically went to the Pacific Theater. And when he was there, one time when he was coming off a landing barge, mm-hmm. One of his fellow people happened to get shot, and he grabbed him and brought him in, mm-hmm. and the photographer happened to see him, mm-hmm. took his picture, and put them on the Stars and Stripes magazine at that time. That was kind of interesting. My other brother was Ray, and he was in the 101st Airborne. He happened to be in the Battle of Bastogne. If you recall what the Battle of Bastogne was, what they were is surrounded by Germans up on top of a hill, and they were running out of supplies and everything else, and they didn't have food. They were running out of food, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And my brother was real lucky because the guy on either side of him got caught in machine gun fire, and he must have been in the middle. And later on, they got so hungry that there was a few of them that disregarded the German fire and went part way down the hill and grabbed a dead cow that was laying there and bring it back up to have something to eat. And they just cut it off with a knife and ate it.
Now, did both of your brothers survive the war?
They both survived the war, but then my older brother, through the Pacific Theater, got malaria. And he also ended up getting emphysema from his smoking and so forth and so on. He finally died at the age of only 52 down in Florida. My other brother, he got emphysema and he died in Rochester. And I've got two brothers left. I had one brother that was also in the Air Force. He went down in the Panama Canal Zone. He was a photographer and so forth and so on, so he used to get in planes and go and photograph land areas, et cetera, et cetera, aerial photography and lab work and so forth and so on. When he got out, he went to work for Kodak and became a foreman of the lab department.
Okay, yeah, well, I guess Rochester is the right place to be then.
Yeah.
All right. Now, as for yourself, as you were growing up and so forth, did you figure that you'd probably wind up in the military yourself, or were you interested in doing that, or did you just not think about it at all?
I didn't give it a whole lot of thought until we got into it with Korea.
Now, did you volunteer at that point, or were you drafted?
Yeah, I volunteered. I actually joined, I think it was the 9th of December, 1950. But we didn't actually go to our basic area, which was in San Antonio, Texas, Lackland Air Force Base. But they held us in Rochester until past Christmas and past New Year's. And then on the 2nd of January, there was 3 planes that were loaded with guys that had volunteered, and we all flew to Lackland Air Force Base together.
Okay. Now, when you enlisted, were you able to choose which branch of the service you will go into? Could you pick the Air Force? Okay.
Yeah, I could pick any branch.
All right. And why did you choose the Air Force?
Well, I'm kind of plain happy. I always wanted to be a pilot, but I never got to it.
All right. Well, let's see. Now, before that you went down to San Antonio, had you ever made a really long trip before, or had you always stayed close to home?
Long trip?
Yeah, like going on a train for a couple of days, or I guess you flew in this
Well,
case.
I used to jump the train and go down to town down near Syracuse, New York. Even when I was about 10 years old, I'd ride that train by myself and go down and visit my grandmother or something like that. We used to go up to Niagara Falls. I've been there 2-3 times. Been over to Crystal Beach, Canada, so forth and so on.
But you hadn't really gone across the country before?
No, I hadn't gone across the country before.
All right. Had you flown before you went down to Texas? Had you been on an airplane before?
No.
All right. So what was that like? First time up in a plane, they're flying you off to join the Air Force.
But it was great. I liked it.
Could you see much from out of the windows of the plane, or was it all cloudy?
At times. Sometimes all you could see is clouds. Sometimes you could see all the patches of ground down below, that just look like little blocks.
Right. Okay. Now, did they land you at Lackland, or did they land you someplace else?
We landed at Lackland.
Okay. And what was your first impression of the place when you got off the plane?
I thought it was going to be kind of tough.
Why is that?
Well, you have these people in basic training that are supposed to really get you disciplined and this, that, and the other thing, And he started right off. So,
So they start shouting at you or whatever?
Oh, yeah, they shout at you for everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, what did your basic training consist of? What did you do for the next X number of weeks?
Oh, actually, a good share of the time I was putting up tents for other people coming in to training.
So you were one of the first groups in then? Was that the...
Yeah, I was in a barracks, so I was ahead of the ones that ended up in the tents.
Well, that was a good deal anyway. All right. How well did you adapt to military life? Was it easy for you, or?
Oh yeah, I had no problem.
Were there other guys who were having more trouble for one reason or another?
Oh, there's lots of guys that had trouble.
What sort of things would be a problem?
They'd get themselves into trouble with, in all kinds of ways, with girls and everything else, Some just couldn't stand. They were probably, I'm thinking, so controlled in their home environment that when they got away, they went berserk.
Kind of like first-year college students, I guess. Go off from home for the first time and just get out of control. Well, now, if people were discipline problems, did they wash out or get sent to the infantry or something? Or
some of them did. Some just got thrown into the guardhouse and so forth and had to do time. And they lost their rank and this, that, and the other thing. They might get up to a colonel. I've seen them get up as far as a sergeant and get busted right back down to a private again.
Okay. Now, what kind of a mix of men were training with you? I mean, were they all white, for instance, or were you beginning to get blacks or Hispanics in there with you?
We didn't have any blacks in our basic training. Mm-hmm. In the first station that I was stationed at, we had blacks. As a matter of fact, I used to go to the day room, shoot pool with one of the black boys. And that was still in Texas. That was in Lubbock, Texas. That was my first assignment.
But that's a situation where the military is, at least in principle, desegregated by that time. And so whites and blacks can serve together. But Texas itself was not. That was still, Jim Crow was still in place. And
I don't know if it just happened that way or if it was designed that way. That I don't know.
Well, in some ways it was designed in the sense that the Army was officially desegregated, and so you were going to start mixing people together.
But I could tell you this much, that at that time, the people in Texas were still fighting the Civil War. Mm-hmm. I was nothing but a D-Yankee.
You were a Yankee, that's right. Now, the men that you were actually training with, were you mostly people from the North who'd come down together, or were they mixing you up from all over the country?
We came in 3 planes. Mm-hmm. So we were kind of in a group
Right.
there that was from the various high schools in the Rochester area.
Okay, so you were kind of a group of Yankees all in there together and training
Yeah.
together at that point.
Yeah.
All right. Now, how long did the basic training last?
Oh, they got us out of there real quick. I was out of there within 3-4 weeks.
Okay. And what did you do next?
I went up to Lubbock, Texas. Okay. Now, part of the day I worked in the office. The other part of the day I had to do basic training because we didn't have basic training
In
at
basic training?
Lackland.
Okay. So they're making up for that. Now, did your whole group go to Lubbock together, or did they split you up from Lackland and send some of you one place? And
Once we left Lackland, everybody went in all kinds of different directions.
Now, how did you wind up doing office work?
They give you tests, okay? And I was good at mathematics, and I was good at writing and so forth and so on.
Did you know how to type at that point?
No, as a matter of fact, I was just a hunting pecker. But I did go over some of the manuals that some of the officers were writing for aircraft.
Right.
And Lubbock was a training spot where they had cadets. And
You were editing or writing?
I'd edited a lot of their stuff there, you know.
So you wrote better English than they did, so you were useful.
Well, at least I found enough so that they wanted me to do it.
Okay. Well, that's kind of a little bit of a distinctive kind of job there. Now, how long did they have you in Lubbock?
Oh gosh, I was probably in Lubbock for about 8 months or something like that.
Now, while you were there, were you expecting that sooner or later they were going to ship you to Korea or Japan or something like that?
Oh yeah, I expected to be shipped to Korea or whatever, you know.
And were there a lot of people going through the base while you were there who were going out faster than you did, or did most men coming in for training stay?
Some of them I knew were headed for the Pacific Theater. You don't know where in the Pacific Theater they're going. They don't come out and tell you you're going to Korea.
Right. But did you stay there longer than some other guys did because you were doing something useful, or were you there about the same amount of time that most trainees were there?
Well, by the time I got there, I didn't have that many of the trainees that were still with me. Okay. I had a job to do.
Right.
And but then they sent me up to Wichita, Kansas.
Yeah.
Okay. And I was there for almost a year, and they wanted me to go to Colorado and become a statistical specialist, which I did.
Now, did you meet your future wife while you were based in Wichita?
I met her when I was in Wichita. She was a nurse student, and I was Air Force, and we used to get together for dances and so forth and so on. And I danced with her more than their, what do we want to call it, their chaperone would like to have us, you know, but, and then I started dating her and so forth and so on. Eventually we got married.
Okay. Now, while you were based in Wichita, what were you actually doing? What was your job there?
I was a statistical specialist. They had me doing personnel reporting.
So what did that consist of? Or what do they need a statistical specialist for if you're doing personnel reporting?
Well, in my case, every group on the base had to make up morning reports consisting of everything that was occurring with the personnel and so forth and so on. And then they all sent them in to me. And I had to go over and make sure that they were right. Mm-hmm. If they weren't right, they went back until they were right. Mm-hmm. The person ahead of me was a little bit lax.
Okay.
And he was intimidated by some of the sergeants.
Now, at this point, what rank were you? Were you still a private, or were you now a corporal or sergeant?
By the time I got married, I was a sergeant.
But when
three stripes.
Okay. But when you were in Wichita initially, what rank were you at when you got there?
I was a corporal when I went there. And then I got my sergeant. I even got my staff sergeant while I was still in Wichita before I went overseas.
All right. Well, yeah. What happens? How do these sergeants react if you tell them their report's wrong? They have to do it over.
Oh yeah. As a matter of fact, I had troubles with some of them in the beginning because this person ahead of me that was doing them was so lax, and they were getting all kinds of reports back from the higher headquarters, you know. And of course they were kind of unhappy about that, you know, because it's a black mark against them. And I pretty well cleaned it up. As a matter of fact, I had a black person working for me in my office. And I even had a master sergeant come in from the transportation squadron. And he was telling this black person how to do our job, you know, what we were going to do and what we weren't going to do. And I happened to walk in at the time. And that sergeant and I got together. We started talking. And I told him that he gets back, get that thing right until this black person approved of it. Otherwise, I was going to the colonel.
Okay. So the officers were backing you pretty well then. If somebody made trouble for you,
well, yeah, they were getting in trouble
you.
because they weren't getting the job done.
Right.
As a matter of fact, it got to the point where I had a captain that was in charge of the group. Okay, and I used to go back over to. I used to work right in the area where all the other people were. You know, I had the office there. Then I'd go back to the headquarters, which was located actually in the tower for the aircraft control tower, and down on the ground floor. And one day, the master sergeant there started giving me a hard time. And we kind of went back and forth and so forth and so on and so forth. And I was telling him, I says, you remember how much trouble you used to have before I took this over. I says, I might have ruffled the feathers of a couple of your buddies. I says, but we're getting the reports in right now. And the captain was in his office listening to all this stuff. Finally, he came out and he says, Sergeant Spinks, you take care of your reporting here in the office. Gary's going to take care of the personnel reporting. So that was the end of it.
Right. Okay. Now, did they eventually then send you on to Denver? Did you go there next, or did you go to Germany? Where did you go after Wichita?
I went from Wichita. This was actually before all this reporting and so forth. I went from Wichita to Denver, Colorado, to take a course
Right.
in statistics. So I took a 3-month course
Okay.
at the
Taking it
at the
at a college or at the Air Force Base?
well, it was in the college, but it was run by military people in that section. So anyway, I took that, and
And then went back to Wichita then?
supposedly they gave me 3 credits, which I never used. But anyway, I got statistical specialist. I graduated from there, went back to Wichita, and
then you're doing all of this. Okay,
and
that
and-
makes sense.
right. And the day I got back to Wichita is the day I met my wife. That was the first day I met my wife.
All right. Okay. So you're in Wichita for an extended period of time. So how did you wind up going to Germany?
They said, actually, a friend of mine that worked up in that particular kind of work come down and told me, he says, guess what? I've got a request for your classification for Germany.
Okay.
He says, so you're going, he says, you're going to be on. He says, we're going to cut orders for you. So.
Now, by then, had you been assuming that maybe you'd be able to spend your whole time in the service in Wichita, or were you figuring that sooner or later you were going to go?
I thought I'd end up in Korea.
Okay. So you get Germany. So Germany's maybe not a bad thing?
Well, at that time, they had the Cold War going on. And they were expecting problems at any time from the Russians,
Yeah.
So I was on the base defense team. So we used to go out and dig trenches and this, that, and the other thing, and practice and so forth and so on.
Now, where in Germany did they send you? Where were you based?
I was in Ramstein, Germany. That was in the 12th Air Force headquarters.
All right. Now, was Ramstein, was that a big base at that point? Was it a large operation?
Air Force-wise, I guess it was pretty decent size, but as far as being in an area that was nice to be in, it wasn't, because you were right in the middle of the Black Forest. And I mean, the housing around there was absolutely historic.
Primitive.
So I kept looking for a place to live that I could bring my wife over. See, my wife got notification 3 months, or I got notification 3 months after we were married, that I was going to Germany. So we packed up and went to New York, because I had to end up going to New Jersey. Of course, the car broke down on the way. I threw a piston through the side of the motor. That kind of slowed us up a little bit. But all the time I was over in Germany there, I kind of keep my eye open, trying to find a decent place to live that wasn't all dirt floors and black exterior and celluloid windows and so forth and so on. And I just never could get her over there.
Now, were you in barracks on the base then instead, or did you actually live?
I was in barracks. Yeah, I didn't have to live out in the economy. Actually, in the beginning, as I was leaving the United States, my orders said that I was to be in Wiesbaden, in the U.S. headquarters, Air Force headquarters in Wiesbaden, Germany.
And that's a proper town, so you might have a
That
place
is
to
a
live.
big town. I mean, you could find everything in Wiesbaden. And I was on a banana boat going over there, and they changed my orders to Ramstein. That banana boat was fun too.
Yeah, what was that trip like?
Oh, we crossed the Atlantic Ocean in November.
Okay.
I don't know if you know about anything about November Ocean in the Atlantic, but it gets rough.
Yep.
Well, we had people that were sick before they ever took the lines off of the dock. So I got in, and I found myself a top bunk.
Right.
I had to slide my head in sideways underneath one of the pipes that ran across the top because they didn't leave any more room than that. And when I could, I'd get up and I'd sit next to the exterior door, and I'd open the door, and the ship would dive into a wave,
Right.
and it would come down and it'd knock the door closed. After it went by, I'd open it up again. It was quite a trip.
I'll bet. Now, did you get out on deck at all, or at least did you do that when the weather was better? Or?
Yeah, we had a couple days there when we could get out on one certain portion of the deck. We weren't allowed to walk around the ship. Number one, because some of the families were on an upper deck, where we were in the hole. So,
About how long did that trip take, do you think? How many days were you on the ocean?
I think that took, they took 10 days to get across the Atlantic.
Okay. And then where did you land?
What was the name of the place again?
Land directly in Germany or something?
We landed in Germany.
So like Bremerhaven or one of those.
Bremerhaven, yeah. Then we had to get on a train and go to our destination.
Now, at that point, what kind of condition did Germany seem to be in? I mean, how much had been rebuilt or repaired from all the bombing and all the war and that kind of thing?
Well, your bigger cities were pretty well repaired. But you get into the outlying areas, and all there was left of the buildings was a shell, Down the area where I was, if there was any commercial district at all or anything like that, that's all that was left, is shells of the building.
Yeah. Now, did you see much of the kind of civilian population in the area around the base? Did you have much contact with the Germans?
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, if I went into town and I didn't know how to speak German, other than Guten Morgen and, Dankeschön or something like that, if I wanted to do some negotiating with a clerk or something like that, I'd hunt around and spot myself a young boy about 8, 9, 10 years old, and motion him over. I'd say, "Will you tell this man what I want?" and so forth and so on, because they all take German, or they all take English. So that's how I made it.
And in general, were they fairly friendly to you?
Yeah, the Germans were.
Now, did you have German civilians who were working on the base as well?
Yes.
What kind of things did they do?
Well, they did a lot of the cooking. They did all the stuff that military person would be called KP, you know, kitchen patrol.
Right.
And they would take care, they would clean up the barracks after we left for work and so forth and so on. As a matter of fact, if you left your shoes out there, they'd polish them. So,
Now, was this a time when, were they still using, was it still an occupations situation where American money was worth a lot and there were things like that, or?
oh yeah, they'd love to get a hold of American money at that time, but we had script. We didn't have any American money. We had to change all our American money into script.
And could you exchange that and get marks or something like that?
Yeah.
Or, yeah. All right. And was it possible to sort of buy a lot of stuff? Was the dollar worth more over there at that time, or?
Oh yeah, you got. As a matter of fact, I was even thinking of getting my wife a set of Rosenthal china, which is a real good, because it's made right there. And I could have got it for real cheap. But I figured if I sent that back to the United States and then we were having dinner or something like that, a cup gets broke or something like that, I said, it'd probably cost $100 to replace that cup. So I bought her a Kundu clock instead.
Now, what did your duties consist of there? You mentioned that, you know, part of what you did was help defend the perimeter and that kind of thing. What else did you do there? What was your main job?
My main job was still statistics.
Okay.
And over there, instead of personnel reporting, I was in aircraft reporting.
So what did that consist of?
We had to compile from the different organizations under the 12th Air Force the readiness of aircraft, et cetera, how many were in repair, how many were this, that, and the other thing. We had to report all accidents, et cetera, like that, to the headquarters in Wiesbaden from the 12th Air Force. And the funny thing, I was cleared for top secret. We'd have an aircraft crash going over the Alps, you know, and C-119s were very prone to do that. They didn't like to stay in the air.
Now, were those transport craft?
They were transport aircraft. They were not personnel transport. They were for other stuff. But they had a bad history. And to get the information, I was more inclined to get it from the Stars and Stripes paper than I was to getting it from the source and so forth and so on. We write it down out of the Stars and Stripes, and then we had stamp it with top secret.
Why was it better to get it out of the Stars and Stripes? Was it just easier?
That was your better source of information.
Well, why was that?
Well, because it was readily available.
Okay. But it wasn't as if the people on the ground or whatever were out of the unit would cover something up or try to blame it on someone else?
No, it wasn't a cover-up. It's just a lax of reporting, et cetera.
Okay. So now, were records generally done better or kept better over in Germany than they were back in Wichita, or did you have the same kind of situation where they hadn't been doing a very good job?
Well, I had a situation in Wichita where I was controlling everything. And we had a real good record
Right.
when I was controlling it. As a matter of fact, I don't remember ever having a report sent back
Right.
from the higher headquarters while I was taking care of it.
Okay. But then in Germany, then you were not in charge of the whole thing?
No, I wasn't in charge of anything in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, it was, what do you call them, a wife or something like that, that was over me. She was a tech sergeant, I was a staff sergeant.
Okay. So you had military women then on the base and
yeah.
working in this office.
We had military women, we had civilian women.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what range of jobs did they do there? I mean, records and that kind of thing. Were there other kinds of...
Actually, all kinds of office work, finance, everything.
Now, did you have a lot of women Air Force personnel back in the States, or was this something different?
I never ran into much women in the States. But when I got overseas, it was quite prevalent. Number one, a lot of these officers' wives and so forth and so on had get a job doing some clerical work.
But they'd usually be civilians, though, right? They
Yeah.
wouldn't be in the service.
They'd be civilians.
Now, the women who were in the service, were they mostly kind of young, 20 years old, that kind of thing, and not married? Or did you have older women there? Or
Oh, yeah, you had older and younger.
you think some of them had been in since World War II and just kind of stayed on?
I don't think anybody that we had in that group was, but I wouldn't say that the military didn't have any.
Now, what kind of sort of atmosphere was it sort of in the office of the sector where you were working? Did the people get along with each other well and socialize and that kind of thing? Or
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, we had a big party when I left. Yeah. My problem was in Wichita and in Germany, both, I worked under officers that were constantly after me to become an officer.
why was that a problem?
I kept telling them, I'm not going to do it because if you're an officer, you're liable to the military until you're 65 years old. I says, I've got a clean contract of 4 years. After that, I have no reserve, no nothing. I just go back and get a A4 classification under the draft, which means that I've already served.
Right.
So I just didn't want to become an officer. That's all.
All right. Well, why did they want you to become an officer?
Because they thought I was wasting my time as an enlisted person.
In other words, you had the ability to keep track of things and manage things and stuff.
I impressed them enough that
Yeah.
they thought I should be an officer instead of an enlisted person.
So that's probably mostly a good thing in most ways. You can get along with these guys and so forth, and they treat you with some level of respect. It's just they keep pounding you to sign on to be an officer.
Oh, yeah.
Now, did you get much of a chance to kind of get off base and tour around Europe at all, or around Germany? Did you get to go other places while you were there?
I used to call up operations and find out if one of the pilots was going any place that weekend or something like that. And I've jumped out of a plane and went to London, toured the Piccadilly Circus. I didn't have money enough for food or something, so we took a bunch of K-rations along with us. But I took my camera. Of course, we went on a military tour of several of the eastern countries, Luxembourg and so forth and so on, France and so forth. As a matter of fact, the officer wanted to stop at Paris, but we said, we haven't got anybody to use in Paris, you know. He says, I'll loan you some, you know, a big deal, you know. Where are we going to get it to pay back? So anyway, we were going around taking a tour by automobile. We had a German driver who was scared to devil in France. And we went in and observed all of the reporting practices that they were doing and giving them suggestions to do it different and so forth and so on, and tell them that this isn't exactly the way they want it done.
So you were going to American bases then in Europe? Was that it? You were?
Yeah.
Okay.
Air Force bases. Right. Yeah. We took that tour. And then I've also flew down to Rome. And that was a lousy deal because I took my camera and I took 3 rolls of film. I come back, I sent them in to get developed. And they never found them.
Oh, well, that's too bad.
So I never had any pictures of anything in Rome.
Are there other particular events or people or things from kind of your time over there in Germany that you tend to remember that come back to you that you haven't mentioned here yet?
Oh, yeah. I had one guy that I run around with. He was pretty fluent. He could read, write, and speak 5 different languages. And we'd go over and to the USO. And one time we got into a poker tournament, and we won at all the tables. And the gal that was running the USO there presented us with a bottle of champagne. So we went into town, we were drinking bottles of champagne.
And did the USO have a very big presence there? I mean, did they have a regular thing on the base, or how did they work there?
Oh yeah, she had an office there. Yeah, we'd take a trip with the USO, maybe down to someplace like Heidelberg, where they have the castle up on the halfway up the mountain. Boy, that's a beautiful place inside. All the tapestry and rug work, and this, that, and the other thing, you wouldn't believe it. It's beautiful. And we'd go down into the one section, maybe have a glass of wine or something like that. And of course, the water ain't much to drink over in Europe, you know. You either drink beer or wine.
It's a little better these days.
Unless you're in the big cities. Yeah. If you're in Wiesbaden, you could get water, but not in Ramstein or Heidelberg or someplace like that, or Baumgarten.
Now, after you were out of the service stuff, did you ever go back to Germany again as a tourist or anything?
No.
Okay.
No.
Now, when did you finish your tour in Germany? When did that kind of time in Ramstein come to an end?
It was December 1954.
Okay. And then how did they get you back to the States? Did they fly you or put you in another boat?
They had me scheduled for a boat, for another banana boat. But by that time, I knew a lot of people.
Right.
So I went up and got a hold of one of my buddies, and I asked him to find me a spot on Matt's plane.
Yep.
Which he did. So I came back by plane.
Now, when you're flying back over the ocean at that point, did you have to make several stops along the way? Did you have to stop in Ireland or Newfoundland or someplace like that? Or did you fly straight across?
We had one stop at, what's the islands there? There's There's some islands down in the Atlantic there that they stopped and refueled and so forth.
Like farther south, like the Azores or something like that? Was it south? Did you fly south?
It
or
was south,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, probably the Azores, kind of in the middle of the ocean there. Yeah.
We ate there and so forth and so on, and then we flew on to New York.
Now, once you got home, then what did you do?
When I got home, well, first of all, I told the wife to come to New York because I hadn't seen her for 14 months.
Had she stayed in Kansas all that time, or was she?
Well, she stayed in New York,
In New York?
with my folks.
Okay.
Yeah. So she came to New York. I knew what hotel she was at and so forth and so on, so I got together with her. As a matter of fact, I stayed with her rather than staying on the base. And I just go back to the base whenever they requested me for part of my separation process.
So you had like another 60 days or something before you were officially discharged? Was that the deal? You were still in the military at that point. They didn't immediately discharge you when you got back to the States.
No, they didn't complete the discharge. My discharge was actually effective December the 9th. I think I got there about December the 5th.
Okay, so just a few days.
Yeah.
All right. Then where did you go from there?
We left there and we went back to Rochester, where my wife had all of her things and so forth and so on. And she had bought some clothes for me, you know, so I didn't have to be in military uniform all the time, stuff like that. And we went out and did some car shopping, bought a older car.
Did you have some money saved up from the time in the service?
She was saving it.
Okay. Was she working as a nurse or something during that time?
She was working as a nurse, a registered nurse in the Strong Memorial Hospital in Rochester, New York. And then, of course, she was also getting my allotment check.
Right.
And she was putting the money away as much as she could. I told her how much to give my parents for her keep there, so forth and so on. And of course, my brother couldn't stand the fact that she was saving that money and so forth. He wanted to get a hold of it, but she says, no. She says, I'm going to need a car when we get back. Won't have a job yet, so forth and so on. So I got to go get a job, and what have you.
Now, what kind of job did you get? Or did you go to college first, or what did you do?
No, first, actually, we started out for Wichita because my wife had spent a Christmas at home for about 10 years. So we didn't get very far, and we were on one of these 3-lane roads with a passing lane in the middle. And I started to pass a steak truck. And as I started to pass him, he pulled over into the middle. And I saw a great big old Suler truck coming down the other way. So I hit the brake and I pulled back in and I clipped his tail light, you know. And I smashed the fender in the front of my car and so forth and so on. So we had to stay there and get the car repaired. So we ended up Christmas in New York, and she still didn't get back to her folks for Christmas. But then later on, after everything was taken care of, we moved out to what we did. We went to a library, okay, and we started looking at things, and we started looking at the different types of businesses were at this place, that place, and the other place, and Grand Rapids looked to me to be pretty good for woodworking, right, at that time. So I says, I like all them lakes around there. Right. So we headed out to Grand Rapids area. We got into Michigan, and we found a little room in a person's house down on Washington Street, right down in Grand Rapids, just off Jefferson. And we were there for probably 2 months, and we bought a home in Wyoming.
Now, did she get a job as a nurse again, or?
Yeah, as soon as we got into Grand Rapids, she went right to St. Mary's, and they hired her right then and there.
Now, did you manage to land a job in the furniture industry, or did you do something else?
Yeah, I went to work for Kendall Furniture. I worked there for a while, and then I found a job at Modernized Furniture that paid better than Kendall did. So I worked there for a while. Finally, I didn't like doing the same thing all the time with the furniture. So I decided to go to school, get into something else. So then I started Davenport on the GI Bill. And I went to Davenport, and I took everything I had. As a matter of fact, I even took CPA review, but I never did become a CPA because at that time it was just out of the question financially. I mean, you had to wear suits and this, that, and the other thing to work in, and so forth and so on. You were getting $1.25 an hour to work.
Yeah.
I just couldn't do it.
So what kind of work did you go into then?
I got a job at Diesel Equipment. What's it called? Diesel Equipment at that time. Anyway, I got into the maintenance department, and changing bulbs and washing windows and this, that, and the other thing, cleaning up messes, et cetera, et cetera. And then going to school. And then I got laid off there, and I went and got a job at Reynolds Metals Company. I was there for 30 years. While I was there, I went to Aquinas College, and I got a BS degree with an accounting major.
So did you actually do some accounting eventually, or you just learned it?
I was in accounting.
Okay.
I hired into accounting at, I started out with billing and so forth and so on. It wasn't long until I was in the cost accounting, et cetera.
Now, to look back at the whole thing now, how do you think your time in the service affected you? Did it help kind of prepare you for stuff later in life, or affect the way you look at things, or was it just 4 years?
I think military is a good preparation for anybody.
What benefits does it have?
Well, it gives you a little bit of self-discipline, which I think everybody needs. You know, it gives you a sense of accomplishment. And yeah,
do you think
I
it
don't
helped?
see anything bad about it.
Do you think it helped you to kind of learn to work with other people or people who were different from you? Was that a useful experience?
Well, I worked well with people, but I've pretty much got along with people all my life. So,
Some parts of your story where you're talking about dealing with, some of the sergeants and stuff in Wichita and things like that, and the people who, might have wanted to give you trouble. You seem to hold your own ground pretty well and work through it.
If I had to do something, I did it. Mm-hmm. I wasn't going to let the job suffer.
Right.
I wasn't going to let the job suffer no matter what the rank was.
Well, you seem to have done well with that, and thank you for taking the time to come in and talk to us today.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.